Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar as part of the In-Cosmetics Global Virtual Conference today. So leading this webinar is Dr. Nava Dayan, who is owner of Dr. Nava Dayan Skincare R&D Consulting. She'll be presenting an overview of utilizing skin microbiome knowledge in skincare product development. But before we begin, I'd like to add that there won't be any time for Q&A, as this is just a taster. But if you have any questions regardless, please feel free to submit them through the chat feature, and also Nava's contact details will be in the slides, so do take that down, and you're welcome to send her any questions or if you need any information. So without further ado, I'll now pass you over to Nava.
Thank you very much, Warka, and good day, everyone. So just a few weeks ago, we were all hoping to meet in Barcelona in person. However, we are now in an unexpected dire situation and connected more than ever before, in worry to our health and that of our loved ones. I thank Reed and the team for taking the lead on this project of pursuing digital media means of communication. So this presentation of mine has a disclaimer. And I would like to start by explaining where I'm coming from. These are the 4 books that I published so far on various topics. You can see they are all skin-related. My interest in the skin microbiome began about a decade ago, and originally was an extension of studying the physical barrier of the skin for penetration of chemicals. At some point, I began working with a team of scientists to study the biological barrier of the skin, which in part is the skin's innate immunity. Therefore, perhaps the most relevant book to our topic today is my book on the skin's innate immunity that was launched by Wiley & Sons in 2012. It was co-edited with my colleague, Professor Philip Wirtz, now a professor emeritus from the University of Iowa. In essence, the book discusses the various aspects of our skin biological barrier and protection means in the innate immunity, including some knowledge on the skin microbiome. I am pleased to say that in a few months, I'll be launching my 5th book that will be focused completely on the skin microbiome. One aspect in the skin microbiome research that I practice and is now very timely is the development of skin cleansing products for the general public and for the healthcare community. In 2017, I published a paper in which I discussed the definition of clean skin. What is clean skin? This paper had become very relevant in those days since it discusses the possibility of a pandemic due to globalization and breach in Western world health and immunity. I would like to read a short quote from this paper. Humanity never wins war with nature, since nature never declares war on humanity. It is clear that eliminating bacteria merely because it is bacteria creates even greater challenges for the future. Bacteria were here before humanity and will probably outlast us. The biota we host in our body is essential to our health and our survival. We must create an environment where biota can thrive. Host has limited space. If seeds are taken by a beneficial species and behavior, there is less room for harmful ones. In the body's immunity is an approach that requires a profound shift in medicine perspective, since it suggests we study health more than we study disease. The barrier, too, should be a consideration. Certain populations, such as the elderly and people with serious systemic conditions, may have a weak barrier both physiologically and biologically. Mapping their baseline immunity and barrier strength allow for product development paths that will serve this population with reduced harm. So, as research progresses, we accumulate information about the biota population that harbors our bodies, its behavior and communications with our own cells. We know, for example, that the environment will dictate the population in habitation and survival. Various areas on the skin exhibit different environments, such as anatomy, lipid content, pH, sweat, and sebum. These were found to be key dictating elements of the skin microbiome population. There are a few key reasons that make skin microbiome research challenging. Those include the assessment of bacteria behavior by human means. What I mean by that is that we classify it as either good or bad. The fact that the microbiome is very individualized, its ability to rapidly build resistance, different limitations of testing techniques that I will elaborate on, and the issue of diversity and moving fine line that separates education from hostility. The microbiome has a role of educating our acquired immunity and makes us stronger. The question is, what is the tipping point at which education stops and hostility of bacteria begins? Another significant challenge in this research is the fact that projects that are microbiome related must include a multidisciplinary team of experts to pursue. For example, it requires microbiologists, pharmacologists, physicians, and more. As an industry, we are yet to untangle various questions. Following examples in the slides are such questions that we are still unraveling. What is the baseline of a healthy skin microbiome? How stable is the population during a lifespan, and when does it change? How the skin microbiome changes when we age? What approach should be taken to facilitate healthy microbiome population on baby skin? Do preservatives affect the skin microbiome, and if so, how? Why most research focuses on identification of bacteria and does not include virus or other organisms population that we have on our skin? In a topical product, be it all probiotic or prebiotic, how can we clean the skin without harming the barrier and innate immunity? And finally, skin microbiome in various skin disorders such as cirrhosis, which is very dry skin, acne, rosacea, and atopic dermatitis. Our current approach in mapping and identification of biota population is seeking its identity rather than seeking functionality. Since biota identity constantly changes, the race may be endless. I therefore suggest the following. Why don't we seek pathogenicity and not bacteria identity? Meaning, for example, seek potential harmful proteins and coding genes. Focus on what markers characterize pathogenic species. Focus on, for example, catabolic enzyme secretions and or toxins. Focus on distinct proteins on the biota wall that we can identify. And focus on profiling human cells-associated behavior. How our human cells respond to the interaction with the biota. When it comes to clinical studies, which is an area of great interest in which we collect, identify, and map the skin microbiome, a few key considerations come to play, and I really outlined a very few here. There are obviously many more. How do we define the baseline? What is the skin condition assessment that we're looking at? Think through about negative and blank controls. What would be our sampling methods? We can do swabbing, we can do stripping, and there are other methods. How do we store the samples? What would be the controls and contamination sources that we should avoid? What can be sequencing biases? How do we quantify the data? How do we run the statistical significance? And finally, very, very important, what can be the correlation to clinical manifestation? For example, if the microbiome changes, but we cannot see the change in the person's skin, does it at all matter? If we try and examine what causes microbial pathogenicity, we can sketch as follows. Numbers, higher the number, the more severe the damage. The virulence of the bacteria, the degree of damage, its ability to adhere to human cells and to release toxins. Various penetration paths through barrier breakage. Example, can it penetrate the follicle? Can it penetrate through the barrier? Does the specific species release any enzymes that can help it penetrate the barrier? And finally, secondary infections. There is a great crosstalk within and between the bacterial communication that makes the entire community stronger than the individuals. A very important aspect in the understanding of biota livelihood, of biota as its livelihood, while sequencing the biota genetic material can provide information about its identity and potential activity, it does not provide information on its livelihood. The bacteria may be dormant or dead and still be detected by sequencing. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to stress the importance of the barrier. Harmful bacteria with a strong barrier will cause no harm, while opportunistic bacteria with weak barrier can take advantage of the breach and become harmful. Strong barrier is a key aspect in our ability to prevent harm by the microbiome. The industry currently focuses on producing cleansing products, but it should in parallel educate how not to harm the barrier. Next slide, please. This illustration demonstrates the ability of microbial entity to penetrate breach barrier. The stratum corneum is the outmost skin layer and provides the main barrier for penetration. If it is compromised due to an insult or a health condition, it may allow pathogens penetrations to deeper skin layers and the elicitation of immune response. And finally, next slide. In my brief talk today, I provided only a faint flavor of the enormous topic of research on the skin microbiome. There is a lot more that we can learn from research and such that we can apply to product development. I thank you for your time and attention, and feel free to reach out to me should you have any questions.
That's great. And that rounds up our webinar, and I'd like to thank Nava for hosting. This webinar will be available to view again on demand, so do feel free to revisit the channel. And also Nava's contact details are on the slide, so if you have any questions or want to request any information, do feel free to reach out to her directly. Full details of the rest of all the webinars that have happened today and over the previous 2 days are again on the channel, so please feel free to revisit those. We have one more final webinar coming up in about 45 minutes, so do tune into that. And with that, thank you so much for listening in today, and take care.
Thank you very much.